I would say when I was in my teens, early 20s, I discovered St. Francis. I want to say that it possibly was I fell in love with the actor in the movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. He was gorgeous at about age 15, but really the life of St. Francis just drew me in. And I remember even as a youth minister, I mean, a core part of what I wanted my kids in youth ministry to understand was that, if you are blessed, then you need to bless the world. And so this call to give back, to work with the poor, has been something that's been with me. And then I got this chance to work here at this Franciscan place and to really go below that surface and really start to understand for Francis what it meant to accompany, to work with those who are on the margins of society. And what I've learned is that Francis came from a wealthy family. Francis gave up a lot to be with those who are on the outside. And that is, in a sense, our call also. It doesn't always mean that you're giving up all of your possessions, but Francis also gave up his access to power, his access to prestige, all of that stuff. He gave that up to go work with those who are poor. And if people do that, God gives it back to you in a different way. I mean, he's the most famous saint of all the saints that are out there. Almost everybody knows St. Francis. All other Christian denominations reverence St. Francis. That God works through you, and so he gave up prestige, he gave up power, he gave up wealth, but he had such an impact in the world. If we could follow him, who was following in the footsteps of Jesus, in the footprints of Jesus, as Francis says it, if we could follow him more closely, we would find such joy in the work we're doing. And that's the other thing I learned about St. Francis. He was just a person of joy. I am the director of the Faith in Action Ministry. That's all the outreach and social justice ministries. About a year and a half after I got here, we changed the name. It had been called the Social Action Ministries. And those volunteer leaders and I decided that we really wanted to try to help people understand that this was really about living out their faith. It wasn't something extra that you add on, but it is a part of our baptismal call as followers of Christ to focus on the poor, the vulnerable, and to work for them. The way that we focus the Faith in Action ministry here is to focus on the areas that were most important in the Franciscan world. So we have one area that's very much devoted to peacemaking and nonviolence. We have another that's focused on care for creation and the environment. And then the third part is dealing with those on the margins. What are our programs to support those who are on the margins of our society? And we really chose those focuses because of St. Francis and St. Clare. So one of our ministries, we call it our Casa Grounds for Solidarity, and that is a ministry that is selling fair trade coffee. The coffee is a part of a relatively small coffee cooperative, but they grow it in Chiapas, Mexico, and then they roast it in Agua Prieta. So the entire business is in Mexico, which we are really happy about. Fair trade coffee is a really good thing, but a lot of times when there's international fair trade coffee, the roasting is done in the first world. But here, the roasting is being done in Mexico, so all the profit is staying in Mexico. So this is an economic development project for us. We just sell it. It's sold by volunteers, so there's no cost, in this whole process. And what we have learned from some of the people in the coffee cooperative that we have met is that people who were working in the United States because there was no jobs for them in Chiapas have gone back home to work their coffee farms because they can get a just price for their coffee. So that's one of our ministries, and we're very excited about that. And we also are working with the Franciscan Action Network. And that organization is a national Franciscan organization that is trying to take the voices of the Franciscans around the country and point them on to Washington, D.C., to our congressional representatives on issues that are important to Franciscans. And one we've been working on for a long time is immigration. So we've been working on comprehensive immigration reform. And so we have a small group here that is working on that. And just a few weeks ago, we did an education session on dining. We called it Dining with the Dreamers. And we had two students who are dreamers who came and spoke with us and told us their stories. And we had 65 people in the room to hear their stories. And that was just so exciting. A lot of people motivated to continue to work on trying to make life better for the dreamers. So for us, partly it's the frustration with the fact that the total immigration reform does not seem to going to be happening. So we decided to break it down into a smaller issue that maybe we could see some results on. And so that's another one of our groups is our Franciscan Action Network. Third one also came out of our group of people working on immigration reform and getting frustrated that nothing seems to be happening at the congressional level. And they started a new ministry of teaching English as a second language to our immigrants. So we have people teaching in 3 places: at St. Matthew's Church, at the Hohokam School, and at St. Andrew's, which is a Lutheran church in Phoenix. And they find great amount of joy working one-on-one and helping people become fluent, become conversational. I don't know if they're going to get fluent, but helping people with their English skills. So those are 3 ministries that we have that are intentionally focused on the fact that we are brothers and sisters to the people who live right across the border with us. And we want to develop that solidarity with them. Thought of our 4th group that I forgot to say, and that is that we have a Franciscan mission in Guaymas, Mexico. And we have a group that takes people down to that mission, and that was on hold for a few years because of the province's worry about the violence that was going on at the border. But that has started up again, and we are regularly taking pilgrims and people down to Guaymas so they can start seeing what they can do to support the mission down there and help the people in Guaymas develop tools to help themselves. Joe is committed to sending staff members on these pilgrimages so they can better understand this Franciscan charism and how it connects to the work we're doing here. And so every year, he sends 1, 2, 3 people with him over there so that they can experience this. And it's a gift because I didn't pay for it. And so it's a real gift that he's giving to the staff members. And so we had 22 on ours, which I think was a wonderful number. I understood that this last year there was close to 40. So I am excited that ours was a smaller group. More time to get to know the other pilgrims, more time to talk to Father Joe and Sister Mary Elizabeth who led it. I think the pilgrimage is 12 days, but we went early with Father Joe, so we had 2 extra days a day and a half really in Rome. A day to get sort of acclimated, and then another day to just run around Rome before the pilgrimage started. So that was another gift. The pilgrimage office, which is in Wisconsin, organizes everything. So the group from here met up at the airport here and traveled together. And then we had a group from Chicago joining us. So there was a few people who joined from Chicago. And then we had a Franciscan friar from Australia who joined us also. He was on a sabbatical and he joined us. So when you go on the pilgrimage, it is 1 part prayer, and then 1 part history, and then 1 part being in the location where you've just learned about Francis and what important things happened there. So, and sometimes it was quiet time that we got in there. Sometimes there would maybe a ritual in that spot. So it was that, and then, companionship around the table eating with the rest of the pilgrims to talk about where you had just been and what you heard and what you saw. And right at the beginning, we went to this little chapel that they say could have been, is said to be the place where Francis's mom, Pica, mother, maybe gave birth to him. There's that story that Francis was born in a stable, so they now have an area where that is. Going to the home where they think is the home of St. Francis. The museum is next to the chapel, but there is the home. I guess it's a little bit of a museum, but you walk into the church, and then you go through a door and you go down the stairs, and they say, okay, this is where we believe that the home, his father's home, would have been. So, but each day is planned out for you. They give you an itinerary, and they say, we're going to start off this morning with Mass, and then we're going to go to San Damiano, which is the place where the cross spoke to Francis, and where he then built space for Claire's sisters to live. So we went and spent almost, half a day there. Or we would go to the tomb of St. Francis and have Mass there and have a little bit of a lecture. And so it's all planned out, but they have it in a way that they're walking you through sort of the life of Francis and Claire as much as they can. It seemed like somewhat chronologically, but not completely. We really went through the paintings on how they reflect onto the life of St. Francis and things that you would miss unless you were on a tour. We got a lot more details, which to me, I love that. I love learning the history and the culture as much probably as the prayer part, because it informs my prayer and my spirituality. So yeah, and then we did Mass in the bottom, but the top we just walked through and did more of a tour. So one day was to do the top part, and day was to do the Mass at the bottom. And then I think I went back another time. But each time we were there, probably at least 2 or 3 hours in the place. That was wild. I mean, in the sense that you know that is where Francis was buried. And Joe preached, and it was beautiful. Interestingly, though, because for everybody else and lots of other people, it's a tourist place. So we had people walking through our Mass at times and walking around back, and that place we were not completely by ourselves. We were supposed to be, but somehow the rope didn't get up. But then my mind always goes with, well, that's okay. I was once a tourist. I have been in Assisi 2 other times as a tourist. Well, as a religious tourist. I mean, I loved St. Francis. I wanted to go to Assisi, and then I wanted to take my sister back to Assisi when I went back to Italy. But I still missed so much. And so, I part of me said, these people are revering St. Francis too, and they want to be at his tomb, and don't get upset by that, Being at the baptismal font, I took pictures of that. That was beautiful. And then I went back. So on my last day, when we had an afternoon free, I basically just went back to all the spots again, because I wanted to get it set in my mind, what happened in each spot. But so San Rufino's was lovely, but honestly, being in front of the cross of San Damiano, which is now in St. Claire's Church, that was that's probably even more powerful to me than the tomb of St. Francis, is to just be able to pray in front of the same cross that spoke to Francis, is to just sit there and meditate and pray in that spot. So for me, when I was a tourist, so this was my first time there, I made it out to San Damiano, and I prayed in front of the cross, and never knew that really wasn't the cross, that's just a replica that's in San Damiano. I don't really even remember getting to St. Claire's Church, because I don't think I knew about it as a tourist. So when I got back as a pilgrim and said, this is the cross, so then I'm like, okay, this is where I want to sit and pray for a while. In Assisi, we spent 2 trips out of Assisi. One was to Laverna, which is up in the mountains, where Francis received the stigmata. And the second was to Greccio, the town where he set up the first manger, the creche scene. So we went to both of those places. And then in Rome, we went to the places that they understand Francis would have gone to when he made his trips to Rome. So we went to the catacombs, because they think that he very likely, because people in the 1200s would take trips to the catacombs. We went to St. John Lateran, which is where the Pope resided, because St. Peter's didn't exist yet in the 1200s. And then in Assisi, we also went outside of Assisi up to the Carcery, which is where he and his brothers would go to pray up in the mountains above Assisi. And then we went down to the plains where the leper hospital was. And we spent time where the leper hospital doesn't exist there now, but where that would have. And that was a very powerful moment for me to see really how close they were outside of the walls. But the whole idea that the lepers were put outside of the walls, outside of the protection of the town, they were not people anymore. In the realm of the people of the city of Assisi, they would do a death mass for you, and basically claim you dead and send those with leprosy out of the walls. And Francis went and lived among them and worked among them, which to me was a sign to the people on the hill that you may claim these people as non-people, but I'm going to show you that they are, you know. And Francis did a lot of preaching by just how he lived his life. And this is really good. So we did go to Riva Torto, yes. So they have the little, reconstruction of like that animal pen, and then the church over it. So yes, we did go to Riva Torto. And we went to Magdalena, which is the little church that's right next to the leper hospital. And then we went to Greccio. Now, it depends on some. Sometimes I've heard people have gone, not to Greccio, but some people have gone there, to Gubbio, but ours didn't do that. We went to the church, and we did the tour, and then we had this big Christmas celebration, feast, and up in one of the restaurants. It was lovely. All the little different nativity sets from around the world. It was beautiful. Beautiful. Yes. Being at the rock where, you know, they say this is the rock from which Francis preached that night when he was trying to help people understand that we need to be about, you know, people understanding that Jesus was born as a baby, as a poor, vulnerable person, and the God so loved the world that God sent Jesus here, and that's love incarnated. Just being at that rock going, wow, Francis stood here and Francis preached here. But that actually happened in almost all the places I was. Like, wow, Francis lived here, Francis spoke here. Claire and her sisters living in the upper rooms of San Damiano. That was a powerful place to be. Just, I could feel Claire's presence there, and her sisters and the work they were doing. That's, to me, was that's what I brought back was, for me, when you can be in the locale, it made it more real. And the same, you know, when I could stand and look up at Assisi in where the leper village is, you could see what Francis gave up. You know, he gave up security and privilege, and you go, okay, well, that's our call. That's my call, is to do that. And then I think the thing that stuck with me most is when we were standing down there, one of them, Father Joe or Sister Mary Elizabeth, said, you know, some of the brothers would walk up the hill to the Carcery, so the caves where they would be living and praying and meditating on a daily basis, and then walk down and work with the lepers, and then walk back up. And what hit me was the movement, you know, that in their lives between prayer and that important of that we need to have prayer and quiet time in our lives if we're going to work with those who are on the margins of society, because we need that support for God. And they practice that in their life. And I came home thinking, I need to practice that better, that movement, that balance between contemplation and action. I'm not doing as well as them, but they're always there in the back of my mind about that call to be centered in God as I do the work of centering with those in the world who need our support and our help. So that's what I brought back. And then we had time there. We were instructed, which is good, to go spend about a half an hour just sitting in nature and meditating. It was beautiful. They walked us around and they walked us through all of the different rooms, just like they did at Greccio. They walked us through the rooms. Then we went out to a rock area and had a prayer service. And then they said, now go sit and be quiet. Go sit in nature, because this is what Francis would have done. And so we did. Right at the top there, there's Francis sitting at the Carceres, sitting sort of lotus style, looking down into the valley. That's a beautiful statue. The simplicity of when Francis was there, and then how, which is sort of sad, but which is probably more like all of us, couldn't live just as Francis did. So then they built these little cells for them to live in, both there and at Greccio. And I guess at Laverna, I don't remember getting into the cells there, but still, just how very simple they were. And that when we were at, and now I'm going to get that confused, whether that was at the Carceres or whether it was at Greccio, where Bonaventure's name is on one of the cells, St. Bonaventure's. And that was, to me, just meaningful also to be in the same place as the great theologian Bonaventure. So, but to see the simplicity of which they could live, and a call in my life. I don't do it real well, but I keep trying to live more simply. When they said 50 sisters slept in this little room, and then they say, I learned that Claire often was the one who was taking care of the sisters who was sick and ill, and she wouldn't give it up to anybody else. It was just, I don't know, there was such a sense of realness to their life. It tend to put saints up on pedestals, but there was a real realness to being in that spot and going, wow, that took patience, love, kindness to have 50 women living in that little space. And she modeled that for her sisters. But we did stop down at the Porziuncola. There is a spot where they say that Francis and Claire had a picnic together, and there's these two statues, and they're having a picnic, and it helped to make this sense of there was a real deep friendship between them. They weren't just, holy people who, shine with a halo. It's about real people having real relationships with each other and then with their brothers and their sisters. It took us about 2 hours to get to Laverna from Assisi. And then we did some prayer, and then we learned about what happened at Laverna. We saw the caves where Francis would go and pray. We spent some time just doing some quiet prayer. And then in the afternoon, there is a procession every day from the church that's there now to the chapel where Francis received a stigmata, and you could join in the service and then walk this procession to go be in the space. I did that. You could also just climb in the mountains. They suggested if you just want to go be out in nature, because that's what Francis was doing here, was just praying in the caves. But I'm like, well, I can pray in nature back in Arizona. I can't walk this procession with all these friars when I'm back in Arizona. So I did that, and that was wonderful. Being on the pilgrimage with a friar, we also got our own private time in all of these places also. So we had already been in the Stigmata Chapel, just our group, to do a prayer service. We got to be in the Porziuncola as our group, in San Damiano as our group, because they would schedule the time. So when you go on a pilgrimage, you sort of get the special treatment in these places to really get to experience the spirit of Francis and Claire. When you see the caves where Francis slept in and prayed in, to me it's just this, wow, I don't think I could have lived that life. That's just, and not that I want to, put it on a pedestal, because I don't. It just made him more real to me. When you live that life, you think, oh my God, you're lying on a piece of rock and you're spending months up here, because he would do these, 40-day fasts and 40-day periods of Lent, and he would be up there praying. It's like he was really inspired and committed to living this life of God out, developing himself and living it in the world. So this is not a tour. This is really a pilgrimage. It's a journey, a spiritual journey that you're making to these places. Yes, we went in there, and then I went down and I did the tour underneath the plaza to see the Roman ruins. So to see how far back the ruins go also. There's a museum. There is a museum right off of the piazza there that sort of go down the steps, and now you get to see everything that's underneath. You see the actual original steps of going of where the entrance would have been out of this lower plaza up to the temple. But the plaza that's up there now, the piazza there, is actually above what would have been there during Roman times. I can't imagine not getting along with other people on this kind of adventure together. They gave us time. At the beginning, we spent time sort of talking to each other, some of the other pilgrims, and really encouraged us to spend time getting to know each other. And it was a fun experience. I met new people, or people that I maybe knew here from the Franciscan Renewal Center but didn't know well. Feel that I know them better now. And we also had fun. I mean, we went out at night and, had ice cream. Well, daily I had ice cream. I had gelato. I think that's a requirement. Other people didn't feel it was a requirement to have it daily, but I did. But we would go out and we would go out at night and have a glass of wine out in these piazzas at night. I mean, when you're in Assisi in the nice time of year, and even in Rome, people live their lives outside. They have small homes, but they live out in their piazzas. And there was a music festival going on right next to us, and music was playing, and we went out to the music festival one night. And so, yeah, a lot of real socializing, So yes, definitely develop relationships. And we've had one reunion since then. A second reunion got canceled at the last moment because of illness. But I do recommend. It's not inexpensive. So I would say to look into the cost and save up for it. But yes, it was, if you want to do a tour, then no. But if you want to do something where the Franciscan charism is something you really want to develop in your own spirituality, that the way they live, they move, the way they think, their attention to what is important in the Franciscan world, then going and being in those places really makes it come alive. I would encourage people to do the pilgrimage. And one of the things, since I've been on the pilgrimage, in one of our ministries, we have an outreach to veterans, and there is a Franciscan pilgrimage just for veterans. It's a healing pilgrimage for those who are suffering from trauma. And when I heard about it, I think because of my having just been more recently on a pilgrimage, it just seemed a perfect sense to me for trying to promote that here. So that's something within our ministry that we're trying to promote, and trying to find ways to raise some funds, get some funds donated so some of our hurting veterans can go on that. I don't know if I would have had such a gut feeling like, yeah, we've got to do this, if I hadn't just been there. And we've also decided that we contacted the pilgrimage staff, and the ones who do this special one for the veterans, and they're actually going to come here and do a special retreat for veterans who are suffering from trauma, and they're going to give it a Franciscan flair. So actually, two different things are coming out of my pilgrimage. And now when I'm with my different ministries, these different outreach ministries, I am much more committed to them understanding their Franciscan roots that can help them as they do these particular causes or issues that they're dealing with. And I'm being able to bring that back, and bringing back to them the need for them to engage in silent contemplation, meditation, to be able to do their work well. And so those are my lasting things that I'm able to bring into the ministries that are working in the Faith in Action ministries. Well, for anybody out there who hasn't figured out their way that they want to put their faith into action, I'm always happy to talk with people about helping them find their way. It may not be here at the Franciscan Renewal Center, but I believe everybody has a call in them. And I think sometimes the disconnect is they don't know how to make that call. They don't know how to get placed into what it is that they would really want to do. And that's what I'm here for, is to help people to figure out how they put that passion, that interest, whatever they have, and connect it with some way that they could live it out. Because because that's what Francis encouraged all the lay people around him to do. Those who couldn't join the order, he said, that's okay, you don't have to join the order. You just need to figure out your way to live this life out in the world. And I feel like I'm carrying on Francis's in his steps to be able to help people figure out how to do that here.